Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi. Maseches ARACHIN Daf Yud Zayin. We begin right on top. Tanya, we have a brayso. Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol, he would teach us like this: Ilmole, if it were. So if Hashem, in fact, would have engaged our great forefathers in judgment to evaluate whether, in fact, they're deserving, Ilmole ba'Kadosh Baruch Hu, Im Avram, with the greatest of the great Avram, Yitzchak Yaakov Bedin, in judgment, even they would not have been successful. They would not withstand Hashem's teichecha. Rashi says, he would have pointed out their faults on their high level. So even they would not have succeeded. Rather, everything Hashem does and gives and provides is all an expression of true compassion and kindness. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "V'ato esyatzvu ve'eshpeta eschem afnei Hashem." It's called tzidkos Hashem, all Hashem's righteousness. Asher asa eschem, even your forefathers, even what Hashem provided for them, was an expression of tzedakah, and not because of their deserving. This is another pasuk. Zeh dar darshav. So the pasuk links the dar, the people of the generation, to the leaders, darshav. Zer dar darshav v'vakshe ponecha Yaakov Sal. So there's that linkage. One affects the other. Question: in which direction? Is it the leader affecting generation, or is it the opposite? So we have a machlekes on this matter. There's a machlekes on this between Rabbi Yehuda and Siyam, and Rabban Chad Amar, one says, Dur lifi parnos. The level of the generation is in accordance with the leader. What this means, we'll see in a minute. V'chad Amar, the other one goes the opposite. Parnos lifnei dovroi. The leader is according to his generation. My hilchos are pertaining to what? What are we talking about? Ilim el mal yusa. Are we speaking about levels of righteousness? The Marasar. So one opinion holds, I mali dora, if the generation is righteous, mali parnas. Likewise, the leader is. So the leader is reflective of the standards of his generation. Umar Sava, the other one holds just the opposite. I mali parnas, mali dora. It's the leader that runs the show. Great leader, generation follows as well. So basically, we're connecting, we're matching the spiritual standards of one to the other. So if the leader is great, the dar is great, and according to the other sheet, it's the opposite. I'll give you an example. I'll give you several examples where it wasn't so. The leader and his generation were on totally different planes in matters of spiritual standing. We have Tzidkiah HaMelech, who was a tzaddik in his own right, but is not his generation. The Havamali, he was a tzaddik, but unfortunately, Vidari, his generation, Havamali, were not on that same level. And you have exactly the opposite, Yakim, who was the opposite phenomena. He was not on a level. The Havamali wasn't a tzaddik. Vidari Havamali, but his generation were. The Amar Rabbi Yechon, in fact, we have a statement from Rabbi Yechon, Mishum Rabbi Shimon Yochai. Look at this pasuk, Ma'idach. Why do we find the word Bereshis mentioned once by a reference to the Yoyakim's reign, and once regarding Tzidkiah? What's the message? Ma'idach Bereshis Mamlechas Yoyakim Melech Yehuda, and we have also Bereshis Mamlechas Tzidkiah Melech Yehuda. The message is like this: Hashem wanted to bring the world back, to revert it back to a state of destruction. Back to Tohu, the way it was before. Why? Because of Yoyakim. And his unrighteousness. Right? Because of his poor spiritual standing. Destroy the world. But his generation was deserving. So that saves the day. But once Hashem viewed his generation, who were deserving people, and Siyash V'daita, he was appeased. And exactly the opposite happened with Tzidkiyahu. Hashem wanted to destroy the world and pay Durish Tzidkiyahu because of his generation, who were not righteous. But once he focused on the leader, so he was pleased and he was placated. So apparently, it's unrelated, it's unlinked. You can have a good leader with bad generation, or vice versa. So apparently it's not really connected. Ella, rather, what we spoke about before was Le'inyan tukfa v'nichusa karmeim. We're talking about demeanor, personality. Rashi says tukfa means kas. You have a stern leader. Nichusa noyach l'irtzes, more of an easygoing, forgiving type. That's what we're talking about. What type of leadership does he exhibit? What type of demeanor does he express? What type of approach to leading? So, according to one shita, Hashem adapts the leader to the generation as per their need, as per their type of what they need, right? Whereas the other shita says the opposite. Hashem adapts the generation to the personality of the leader. The leader is a certain type, generation will be tweaked accordingly in order to relate to that leader and to be led by him. Hadron Halachish Berach, it says the Mishnah, Hesegiyad is a halach that we find by ARACHIN, a fellow pledges. Right? That person's, erach, right? As per prescribed in the Torah, depending on gender and age, right? Different age brackets have different prices, right? It's all a set flat rate, which is unique to ARACHIN. What else is unique to ARACHIN? Hesegiyad, person can't afford, he's in poor financial standing, so we give him a discount. So these are elements that are unique to erech, as opposed to neder. Neder is a different type of pledge. You pledge the person's actual market value. How much would he fetch if he was sold as a slave in the market? And that's what you're giving to the Beis HaMikdash. That's called neder. So over there, it's actual market value. There's no flat rate depending on gender or age, and also there's no discounts. Whatever it is you owe, and pay it up eventually. So Hasagad, this concept of discounted payouts, depending on financial affordability, but neither. That's linked to the pledger, meaning you have a fellow who's an ani, a poor man, who pledges the value, the erech of a rich man. That's irrelevant. You're the one paying it. If you can't, right? If he can't afford, he gets a discount. Vashana benider, as opposed to the age factor that depends on the person you're pledging about, right? Doesn't depend on you, it depends on him. How old he is, that's how much you're pledging. V'erchen b'nerech, and likewise the gender factor is on the person who you're pledging about. And finally, v'erech b'zman ha'erech, in terms of determining financial standing and ability to pay, that is linked with the moment when you made the erech. Sorry, Rashi says here we're talking about the age factor again. So regarding the age, it all depends on his age at the moment of the pledge. So let's say he pledged about a person who's, between 20 and 60, which is the biggest, highest rate. And then by the time he got around to paying it out, the fellow's above 60, so the rate should drop. No, because you pledged the higher rate. So Bizman Erech depends on the time of Erech. Explains the Mishnah. What's that first item? The idea of the discounted rate, which relates to the pledger, not the pledgee. Hesegad b'noy. The Keta, for example, ani, you have an ani, a poor man, she'erach has a usher, he committed to the rate of an usher. So he said, the erech of that person is upon me, and that person happens to be wealthy. That's irrelevant. No, it's an erech ani, he pays according to his ability. He's ani, he's the one paying, so he gets a discounted rate. And the same vice versa. V'asher she'erach ani, a wealthy man, pledged the erech of an ani, no, it's an erech ashi, he pays full rate, as per his financial abilities. And as we're going to see in the Gemara, according to this opinion, Tanakama, even if, let's say, an usher gets up and he pledges erech, in which case he has to give full rate, and an ani, let's say, overhears him, he says, I want to actually sponsor that person's, obligation. So now, since he is a poor man, he will get a discounted rate, irrespective of the fact that he's really sponsoring a rich man's full rate obligation, because the fact is he's paying it and he's poor. Okay, that's the chiddush in Tanakama, and Rebbe will disagree with that. We'll see in a minute. Okay, aval karbonis einike. So this is regarding erachin, but when it comes to karbonis, it changes slightly. For example, so by a mitzvah we have different levels of karbonis. A wealthy man brings an animal, if he's less wealthy, birds, and otherwise a mincha. So again, it's a fluctuating commitment depending on his financial ability, right? So we have a fellow who's a mitzvah who's really obligated in karbonis. And his friend comes along and says, I'm going to sponsor your karbonis. Okay, I'm paying out your karbonis. So what level do you bring? It really depends on that person, what he's obligated to. You're sponsoring his karbonis. Whatever he's obligated, that's what you do. If that person's ani, which obligates him to a carbon of lesser value, then that's what you bring. Maybe carbon ani. If he's a wealthy man who has to do a full high-level carbon, maybe carbon asher. The sponsor likewise sponsors the same. Rabbi Eimer, he disagrees on one account. He says, actually, when it comes to erachin, it also changes when it's a sponsorship. Rabbi Eimer, my opinion is, af be'erachin kain, the same exact concept applies to erachin. So again, let's say a fellow pledges an erachin, he's wealthy, and another fellow sponsors his pledge, full rate. The same, like by karbonis. Yeah, but if it's a non-sponsor situation, Reuben the ani is pledging the erech. He himself is initiating his own pledge, the erech of Shimon the Asher. Why in that case is it a discount rate? Because he's not sponsoring his obligation, he's initiating his own obligation. He's poor. The wealthy man, Shimon, is not obligated, has no obligation. I'm not sponsoring his. And since Reuben is poor, he pays poor. But if it's a case of sponsorship, so just like by carbon, if you're sponsoring, it's about his obligation. If he's wealthy, you got to pay wealthy. Otherwise, same here. Shimon got up and says, I'm pledging my erech, in which case he's going to be billed full rate. And then somebody comes along, even a poor man, and sponsors that obligation, full rate as well. And Ani overhears this, Ruvain, the Ani Vamar, he says, I'm paying what he has to pay, so I'm sponsoring his obligation. Of course, in this case, it's a full rate. Nice Nerech Asher, on which the Chacham disagree. According to Tanakama, by Erachin, it's strictly based on the payer. Poor, poor, rich, rich. Now let's just dwell on the semantics. The beginning, Mishnah began with Hesegad b'noider. Neder is a totally different system than Erech. Noider is like market value, actual value. Erech is a set flat rate prescribed in the Torah. And Hesegad, the affordability, sliding scale concept only applies to Erech. So why does the Mishnah say Hesegad b'noider? Hesegad b'marechu. It's limited to marach, not to Neder. Well, says the Gemara, actually, since in the pasuk we find it sort of, interchangeable. It's erech with neder, like in the same breath. So the Mishnah referred to the marach as a neder. But really it's an erech system, not neder system that we're talking about. Hashanda minider. The second item in the Mishnah is the age bracket factor. It's contingent upon the neder. And again, the same question. We're talking about an erechin, which has age factors. Neither doesn't have age bracket. Neither is just plain market value. Hashana b'nidar b'nerchu. The answer is because we spoke neider, so now the flip side is nidar. I did Amar Hesegad b'neider, since in the previous halacha we refer to neider as we explained based on the pasuk Amar Nami Hashana b'nidar. So Mishnah continued on and referred to a nidar regarding the next halacha. Hesegad b'neider ketzad. How does this play out? Ani sherach asa asher neis nerach ani. So Reuben, the poor man, was marich and asher. He pays poor because the fact is he's pledging and he gets a discount. My timer, right? It's all about the pledger. This financial consideration is linked to the ability of the noider, right? The one who's paying it out, unrelated to the person you're pledging about. But in matters of carbon. So again, when it comes to erech, even if you're sponsoring a wealthy man's erech, and Reuben, who's sponsoring, is poor, he pays poor. But by karbonis, if you're sponsoring, And it's all about what he's obligated. So for example, Aresha Amar, Korbanish Mitzvah Zelai. A fellow gets up and sponsors. He says, I'm committing to the Korbanos of this mitzvah. What level does it bring? Depends on the identity of the mitzvah. Hoya mitzvah ani, maybe Korban ani. So if Shimon the mitzvah is a poor mitzvah who's slated to bring birds or mincha, then Reuben the sponsor brings likewise. Even if Reuben is wealthy, v'afgad madira yasher, right? That's what it seems in the Mishnah. It's all about the fellow who's the mitzvah. So even if Reuben can afford more, he gets away with less. Torah says the low level carbon is limited for $1 of our poor man. He's not poor. Reuben who's giving the carbon is a wealthy man. Rabbi Yitzchak, you're right. We're speaking that both parties are poor. Shimon is poor, and Reuben who's sponsoring Shimon is also poor. So you need both parties to be ani, to qualify for a carbon ani. But if one of them is in fact an usher, whether it's the person you're sponsoring, so you're sponsoring a carbon usher, whether it's the sponsor himself as an usher, it doesn't qualify for a discount, so he has to bring a carbon usher. So this halacha in the Mishnah, that when you sponsor a carbon mitzvah, you get a discounted rate, that is provided both parties are ani, the mitzvah and the sponsor. So as the more, even so, Vidilma, perhaps, even if the sponsor is an ani, it doesn't qualify for a discount. Perhaps had Rahman is compassion on the person himself, the mitzvah himself. So obligated to bring the carbon. If he's poor, okay, you get a bird. But a person who chooses to sponsor it, who says he gets a discount just because he's unable to pay? Amadir loy. The one that's madad, the one sponsoring, perhaps he's not entitled to a discount. Aksiv who? The pasuk said in Dal who? Talking about the mitzvah himself. But this discounted system is limited to the mitzvah himself. So how do we know? To apply to a sponsor. Amarab, Adabar, we have another pasuk. Ben Yoda Masegas. The Masegas, extra pasuk, to cover even the sponsor. L'Rabbi is to include even the Sanoida, the sponsor as well. Okay, so again, if both sponsor and the one being sponsored are ani, discount. So as the Gemara, but Aval Madira Yasha, but if the sponsor himself is able to pay more, Chanami de Maisa Bashir is going to bring a full-fledged carbon. So focusing on the sponsor, and the one that's paying it out. So what is the Mishnah contrast? Mishnah seems to be drawing a line here, in contrast to the Erech system, where it's all about the one paying it out, as opposed to Karbanis, where it's different. Well, you tell me the same, similar system applies to Karbanis. You're focusing on the payer. Right? So if the payer can afford, he has to pay it out in full. You're right. It's 101. In one situation, we focus on the one being sponsored. And that's the case where both parties are poor. Reuben, who's sponsoring Shimon's Karbanis, is poor, and Shimon, the Mitzvah himself, is poor. Chada. So in fact, one idea applies to a Mitzvah ani, Madira ani. One halacha will apply when they're both ani, the Mitzvah and the Madir. In fact, in that case, he gets a discount. So the Mishnah says, right, that the Mitzvah is an ani. The sponsor only brings a carbon, that's provided both are ani. So chada, so one halacha, that halacha, the discounted carbon is only a mitzvah ani and madir ani. Both individuals are ani. But v'chada, but the other case, that Mishnah referred to, that if he's an usher, the carbon is upgraded. V'chada l'muti. Mitzvah asher u'madira ani. So Lamuti means, in this case, it will be different. Very different than the ARACHIN. Which case is that? Which case is different than ARACHIN? Mitzvah asher u'madira ani. that all of the mother, the sponsors an ani, but since the mitzvah who you're sponsoring can't afford, and he personally is obligated to a higher level carbon, you have to follow through. You have to pay it out because ultimately you're sponsoring his carbon. And in this case, it's different than erech, where it's strictly based on the pair. And the Mishnah is pointing out that, perhaps you would think otherwise. Perhaps there's room to think. And just like in the previous case, when they're both ani, you bring a low-level carbon, perhaps in this case as well. Since the Torah included, where did the Torah include in that pasuk, Yadam Aseges, to apply the discounted rate to that case when they're both ani, is Rabba perhaps will apply it to this case as well. Kamash Malon. Comes the Mishnah and says no. No, in this case, where you're sponsoring an usher's carbon, you have to pay it out in full. In fact, we have a brayso as well, which highlights this point. Since we find differently by ARACHIN, we find that it's all about the pair. The pair only. Ani sherach usher is an erech ani. Reuven, who is the ani, who's pledging the erech of an usher, what does he pay? Erech ani. What he can afford. Yochel Afsakein, perhaps in this case as well, where Reuven, the sponsor, is poor, should get a discounted rate. Talmud imdal who? It's limited to the Mitzvah himself. If he's an ani, yeah. But if the sponsor is an ani, he doesn't get a discount. Unless, as we said, in one case, where both parties are ani. So that's one case. We bring a carbon ani. But otherwise, if one of these two people, either the sponsor or the mitzvah is an usher, full rate. So if he can afford, for sure, and even if he can't afford it, since he's sponsoring the carbon of an usher, full rate. Okay, let's stop for a second. So this is the Shita of the Rabbanan. And in terms of mitzvah, full rate. If any one of these two are usher, Reuven, the sponsor, is an usher, or Shimon, the one's being sponsored, is an usher, full rate card. Because if he's an usher, of course he pays it out. If the fellow he's sponsoring is an usher, well, you're sponsoring the cover an usher. Only time he gets a discount, only time a sponsor gets a discount is if both people are ani. Reuven and Shimon, and that's included in the pasuk in Yodam HaSeges. And Rebbe agrees to this as well. All the machlekes we have is by ARACHIN. The Chacham take a pretty straightforward, simple approach. They say, look, it's all about the pair and that's it. So even in a case where you're sponsoring, it doesn't matter. It's all about who you are, the one actually paying the bill. Ani, usher. To which Rebbe takes issue. He says, similar to what we have by Mitzvah, if you're sponsoring the carbon of an usher, you have to pay full rate. Likewise over here. Even if the actual person paying it out, Reuven, is an ani, but if he's sponsoring the erech of an usher, so again, what happened was the usher pledged a certain erech, which requires him to pay in full, and Reuven comes along and sponsors it, full rate. Continues the Gemara. Rabbi de Amar. So according to Rabbi, who says, my opinion is up ARACHIN Kain. Likewise by ARACHIN, if he's sponsoring a wealthy man's erech, full rate, despite the fact that the sponsor is a poor man. Alma, apparently, Omar, he says, Basach Yuv de Gavras Linan. Apparently, Rabbi holds that we focus on the one being sponsored. Chiyuv de Gavras, the Chiyuv, the man being sponsored. So if he's wealthy, he's paying full. The one sponsoring has to pay in full as well. Basach Yuv de Gavras Linan. So now back to the story of Mitzvah. If it's so simple So basic. That if you're sponsoring a wealthy man's obligation, you have to pay in full. So the same would apply to Mitzvah. If the Mitzvah is an usher, which requires him to bring a high-level carbon, even if the sponsor is an ani, logic would dictate that's no different than erech, pay in full. So we don't need a pasuk to exclude it and to set him apart and to rescind that discount. So what's the pasuk coming to tell you? Who? The word hu, what's it coming to exclude? L'muti mitzera ani u'madira asher. Oh, it's addressing a different point. Let's say the mitzera himself was an ani. So Shimon was a poor man, obligated to bring a low-level carbon. U'madira asher, and Reuben, the sponsor, is a wealthy man. So perhaps over here the tables turn. If it's all about the person being sponsored, so in this case the person being sponsored is poor, so maybe the rich sponsor can get away with a cheap carbon. Perhaps I would think, since Rabbi tells us we focus on the person being sponsored, so perhaps in this case it works to his benefit. You're sponsoring a poor man, pay poor. Comes the pasuk and says, who? Yeah, if the material is poor, fine. But that discount does not carry over to the sponsor. He has to pay in full. Okay, so let's just recap the Gemara until this point. So, by Mitzera, let's start from Mitzera. You have an ani sponsoring an ani, in this case, discounted rate, but otherwise full rate. An ani sponsoring an usher, or an usher sponsoring an ani, all agree in this case. In these cases, the full rate carbon. By Erchin, however, we have machlokes. If it's a sponsor situation, an ani sponsoring an ani, all agree, okay, discounted rate. Now, if it's an usher sponsoring an ani, all agree it's a full rate. But if it's an ani sponsoring an usher, here we have machlekes. Rabbanan say it's all about the one paying it, who's an ani. Rabbi says, he's sponsoring an usher. Full rate applies as well. Continues the Mishnah. Let's say his fortunes changed. So when he made the erech pledge, he was couldn't afford. Then he struck it rich, now he could afford. So before he actually paid it out, now he can afford. Or the opposite, he had it, now he lost it. So what determines? The moment of pledge or the moment of pay? In both these cases, he gives full rate, because if he was usher at any point in time, full rate applies. Rabbi Omer goes a step further. Let's say he was poor when he made the the erech, and then his fortunes rose. Now he's back to poverty. Since he experienced ashir is somewhere in the middle, Asher has to pay full rate. We'll see that in the Gemara. Continues the Gemara that this is limited to erech payouts, but karbonis obligations, like by Metzora, right, doesn't work like this. Because over there, his level of obligation depends on where he's holding when he brings the karbonis, not when he was a Metzora. We look at it now. And the Mishnah concludes, in terms of assessing his, financial standing, it's about the money that he has in his possession, not money that's going to be coming in the future. Even if his father already passed away, left over a huge inheritance. Ribu is 10,000, right? 10,000, $10 million. He has this ship at sea, right? Bringing in all kinds of goods, which is going to produce a huge amount of tens of thousands of profits. Hegdish can't access that. He doesn't have it yet. We'll see that in the Gemara. Okay, let's go back to the beginning of the Mishnah. Ani Vasher, he pledged when he was an Ani, then he struck it rich. Came time to pay, he can afford. He's got to pay full rate. Why? It's all about the yad, whatever he can pay, right? So if at the point of payout he can pay, he's got to pay. Likewise, Asher Beheni, he was wealthy initially and now he's not. So full rate applies as well. Asher tasig yad hanoider. So here we focus on the word noider, on his financial status at the time of the neder. And since at that time he was able, so that's how he gets billed. Rabbi Omer takes it a step further. He was poor, he got wealthy and back. and back down. Noisen erech asher, full rate applies. By the time they read the Y, he consistently was poor. Unless he's in a state of poverty from beginning to end. But if anyway along the process his fortunes rose, full rate applies. Says the Malmi, that's the case of Imdalhu. Let's shift to Metzora, where it also says who. Imdalhu, if you can't afford, he brings the bird, he brings the mincha. Chanami, there too, you're going to say that the discounted rate applies only and unless he was in fact in that state of poverty all throughout, no fluctuation whatsoever, mitchilas about seif, beginning to end. So if at any point in time you experience riches, he gets full rate carbon. Perhaps you're right. Is that so? But now we have a Mishnah which teaches us otherwise. So we have a fellow that whose fortunes changed midway, and it's not automatic that he has to bring a full rate carbon. Now we have a Mishnah. Metzora shehevi karbonos. So Metzora brought the karbonos. He brought the minimum karbonos, birds, whatever, right? V'hesha, and then he struck it rich. Okay, so now he could afford more. Or the opposite, Asher V'heni. He brought the high level, the animal karbanos V'heni, and now he's poor. What happens? It all depends on his financial standing when he brought the chatas. So, if at that point he was an ani, done. So that determines his status. At that point he was an usher, that determines his status, even if his fortunes changed. No, we follow the asham. That's the pivotal point. It depends where he was when he brought the asham. He goes to another shita. All depends on the birds. So what was his financial standing when he brought the birds? So what do we see? That even if he was asher when he brought his karbanis, or some of them, and now he's an ani. So even if he brought karbanis ani and then he turned asher, so you would think, okay, now he owes a karban asher. He's not done his karbanis yet. He's already an asher when he's up to the next karbanis. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, if his fortunes change midway, we upgrade him. And here it says not so. It says that if he was an ani at a certain point in the process, even if he struck it rich, you stick to that old discounted rate. Says the Gemara here, it's very different. It's based on a pasuk, and you can't compare it to ARACHIN. We have learned explanation on this. All three opinions, whether it's the chatas that determines the asham of the birds, it's all based on the same pasuk. The question how to learn the pasuk. Don't want the Metzora can't afford it, but Tarasa during his purification process. So it's a tahara that determines, meaning it's that moment that will determine whether we charge him full rate or not. Now, what is tahara? Which part of the process? He brings 3 karbanos. Reb Shimon Savar, he says davar mekhaper. We assume it's going on the chatas, which is the main atonement. Umayni chatas the chatas. So that determines his status. Rabbi Savar davar machsher. No, it's the machsher, the carbon that enables him to come back to the Beis Hamikdash. The karbanos umayni, that's the asham. So whatever his financial standing was at the bringing of the asham, that's what determines the whole package. It's the birds that activate the whole tahara process, allow him to shave his hair. What's the tahara? It's part of the birds. So it's a very specific machlekes, particular to Metzora, as opposed to ARACHIN, where Rabbi Yehuda follows the pasuk asher nimahu, that he has to be consistently in a state of anius, otherwise full-fledged rate applies. Okay, velahulamali. If so, that when it comes to Metzora, we work a different system. We don't use the word who to tell you consistency, right? So what's who coming to tell us? We already discussed that earlier with Rebbe's approach, Rabbanon's approach, right? In the previous Gemara. regarding determining the rates of the sponsor, right? The Rebbe according to his approach, the Rabbanan Kadis Lahu according to their approach. Okay, if that's the case, that the word Vahu denotes constancy and consistency. El Miata Vahu Eid. What about the pasuk by the witness? Vahu, he is an Eid. Are you going to say there as well that a fellow could only testify in the Bezdin if he was consistently suitable for Eidus from the moment that he witnessed the scene until he walks into the Bezdin? But if there's some sort of change of status in between, that's it, he's off. Vahu Eid Asher Kosher, unless he's okay and suitable as an Eid, from the beginning till the end of the process, unchanged. If that's the case, if you're going to say so, Vatani, we have a Mishnah otherwise. Haya Raisa says like this. Shimon was Reuben's son-in-law, but he wasn't yet his son-in-law when he witnessed the scene. Today's his son-in-law, Mazel Tov. Ubikeach. He was in full faculty, right? Then he became deaf-mute. Upasuach, he couldn't see when he was there at the story. But then he became blind. Shafai, he was mentally healthy. Then he became deranged. How is it possible? You can't testify in that state. If he's deranged, if he's blind, right? But let's say at point A, when he witnessed the scene, he was okay. And at point C, when he's approaching the Bezdin to testify, he's okay. But in the middle, there was point B, when he wasn't, temporarily was not suitable. Let's say he experienced something, he has some information they can use to testify on behalf of his father-in-law. But at that point, he wasn't yet a son-in-law. He was a total stranger. In the middle, it became a son-in-law, which disqualifies him. We turn to the next one. Then the daughter passed away, so now he's a stranger again. And the same with the other examples. He was in, he was out, and he was in. Pekeach, Pesuach, he conceived, and he became blind. Then he's healthy again. Kasha, in all these cases, okay, because it's all about point A and point C. Those are the critical junctures. Because this is the rule. It's kosher. If he was okay in the beginning and the end, it's okay, even though in the middle he veered off a bit. And that's despite the word vahu, which according to us denotes consistency. So why are they okay? Shani Hassam says there it's different. The Pasuk says Pasuk stresses it's all about when he saw and the moment of yagid, of relating it to the Bezdin. But what happened in the middle doesn't really concern us. Torah hinged it upon the moment of seeing. What was he then? Was he a stranger? You're good. When you walk into Bezdin, what are you now? Stranger? You're good. Well, can you have it? So what's the pasuk of who coming to teach us? Who aid? What's it coming for? A totally different halacha. Regarding a different halacha. Shvuah ha'edus, right? You swear a person, you impose a shvuah. Come help me in the Bezdin. I know you have information that could benefit me. And the fellow denies any involvement, and you impose a shvuah, right? Promise me you don't know anything, and he swears, and he swears falsely, and has to come back and atone for it. So that halacha only applies when he was singled out and identified. When you approach the person that you believe has information to testify on your behalf, and he turned you down with a false oath. Look at the Sanis we learned in the Brisa. Let's say he sees a group of people, he walks in the shul, 100 people, but he knows that there's Adam amongst them, but he fails to single them out. He says, look, here are ye, and swearing all of you, if any of you, if you have edus for me, do come testify on my behalf. Perhaps they're liable to the whole system of shvuah edus if they turn them down. Who aid? Who aid? You have to identify. You have to single out the aid. You can't just approach a group and impose on them a collective shvuah. But let's say he doesn't just speak in general. Yachal, perhaps afilu Omar call me. Let's say he tweaks it a bit. He says anybody amongst you. So in the first case, he just addressed them as a public, says, all of you, right? If you can help me, right? But here he says, call me. Anyone amongst you. So he's singling out the aid amongst them. What happens there? Perhaps they're exempt. Who aid? No, in this case they're obligated. Who ate? Because he singled out the Eid, even though he didn't identify it by name. But he imposed the shvur only on the Eidim, not on the group in general, on the specific people who are his Eidim. And that's what we learn from Behu. Behu ate. Okay, let's recap today's daf. We spoke about Hashem's kindness and chesed to all, even to the others. We spoke about Hashem pairing up the leader with the generation to make for an effective twosome. We spoke about the discounted rate that applies to erech, and that it applies to the person paying it out. We spoke about the age factor that relates to the person that you're making the erech about. We spoke about the gender factor as well, depending on the person you're pledging about, and the fact that the flat rate that relates to the age bracket that relates to the moment of the erech, not the moment of the payout of the erech. Now, in contrast to Mitzayra, where a sponsor, if he's an ani and a Mitzayra is an ani, he gets a discounted rate. When it comes to erech, according to the Chachamim, it's all about the person paying it out. Poor, poor, rich, rich. But according to Reb Meir, there is one similarity between the two, so that by erech as well, if the sponsor is sponsoring the erech that an usher had obligated himself to pay, to the sponsor will pay a full rate despite the fact that he's an ani. Let's say there was some sort of fluctuation, some change in his fortunes, ani v'hesher or vice versa, a full rate applies, which is learned from these psukim. And Rabbi says even if there was a fluctuation, so in the middle, he was an ani, up and then back down, erech usher applies. Contrast to karbanes, where it's all based on the moment of the bringing of the karbanes. Now, which carbon? We have 3 shitas on that. The chatas, the esham, or the birds. This idea of constancy does not apply to Eidus. There it's just about, it just depends on what he is at the moment of Re'iyah and the moment of Haggadah. We'll conclude with an interesting halacha regarding the personalization pertaining to Shvuas Eidus. Okay, all the best to you and Psuros Teves.